Well, folks, welcome back to the Digital Built Forum podcast and also the Digital Built Forum YouTube channel. My name is Adam Beck. I'm here with my co-founder, co-director, Gavin Cotterill. Gavin, how are you today?
Yeah, pretty good. Just adjusting back into life after our UK visit, but yeah, getting back into things pretty well. Thanks. You?
Uh, Very well. And yes, the UK visit was quite exciting last week as we posted on LinkedIn, talking about the sort of digging around that we did with respect to the London 2012 Olympics. But I digress. Gav, this series, which we are calling the Digital Games Dispatch, we've kicked it off in advance of our upcoming SEQ 2032 Digital Assembly, which is running in Brisbane on Tuesday, the 11th of November, in person. We've kicked it off early in the lead up to it so that we can share some views before we get to the 11th. We'll use that event to also record some other views. And of course, the dispatch may continue. We've got 7-ish years until the games. Not that this digital games dispatch will go for the next 7 years, but we'll wait and see how it goes. The idea is to keep it short and sharp and snappy. We want to typically keep our interviews with guests to around about 5 minutes, asking just sort of a handful of questions. And we're going to use this kickoff session to sort of give it a bit of a test run. And look, I'm going to come straight out of the blocks and ask you about digital enablement and the games. You've of course, been across a number of games, and I want to understand from your perspective what digital enablement means in the context of Olympic and Paralympic Games in your mind.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think the best way to answer that is from if you're looking at the asset life cycle. So digital enablement means for different things for different people. So whether you're in the planning component, digital enablement in terms of how digital and data can help better deliver planning objectives and planning outcomes. Subsequently, how digital and data can help from a design and construction, from a handover, and ultimately from an operations and maintenance and service delivery. So really, it's about how digital and data can help better deliver the objectives and the outcomes for each part of the asset lifecycle. And we talk about the games, and we've had many games that have sort of matured on their digital journey. So I want to ask you, Adam, when you look back at those games and you think about London to Paris, what's the sort of, from your knowledge and from the visit that we had in London last week, what is the single sort of biggest leap that stands out really from those two games?
Uh, well, let me sort of start with a bit of a comment going back to 2000, if I can. I mean, that was the Sydney Olympics, of course. It was it's probably the longest running sort of games that I remember. To be honest with you, the Green Games set a new benchmark. It was local in Sydney, of course. That was a real sort of leap in an Olympic and Paralympic Games, really making a big statement from what I can remember. Um, Fast forwarding to 2012 to London, I do remember social media really starting to sort of break through as a common modern platform for engagement and communication. And I do remember, London 2012 being sort of somewhat the sort of social media games. If I sort of fly through 2016 Rio, I think that was more sort of Rio was a bit fragile. It was keeping the lights on. It was keeping, the pipes connected. Tokyo, we had sort of the pandemic games. That was a tough one. I remember watching it. But I think from a professional perspective and what I understand and what I've read and seen and heard, I think Paris, we really saw digital moving away from being sort of, a hardwired, connected hardware thing to digital being embedded in sort of resource planning and workflows. And as digital twin really sort of took a bit of a front seat with Paris. And I can only imagine that, LA at the moment, and of course Brisbane will continue that trend of digital twin. So I think Paris for me, from my perspective, that was a digital pivot to move from being things and hard things and infrastructure to really getting it embedded into workflows and how decisions get made, better, faster, quicker, cheaper kind of thing. So Paris 2024, I'd sort of say that was the big digital leap that sort of springs to mind for me.
Yeah, and let's hope in terms of we've got Paul Foster coming in from the Digital Assembly, looking to bring some of those lessons learned from Paris and other Olympics. So that'll be good to find out a bit more about those lessons learned, building on what you just said there, Adam.
Yeah, and I think from a lessons learned perspective, Gav, um, as you sort of start to sort of catalog previous games and start to noodle through them, like we've started doing, the idea that they all speak to the idea of legacy. And I think certainly, we've seen legacy realized in sort of the physical manifestation of venues and villages that become housing and things like that. We're very sort of, used to seeing the physical legacy that's left after the games. So from a digital perspective, here's one for you. What what is SEQ? What's the opportunity that SEQ, South East Queensland, can't miss? And let me pitch it as between now and 2032, like over the next 7 years, because once sort of, the flames lit, it's kind of like it's done. So over the next 7 years, what's the digital opportunity that Southeast Queensland can't afford to miss? What would your response be to that one?
Well, there's three components I would put to that rather than just one. I think, first of all, the here and now is around procurement,
Hmm.
ensuring that we're actually procuring the right level of data to support the outcomes to plan, deliver, and operate assets. And then I think for me is the second component is the fans experience. So ensuring about how digital and data through that asset lifecycle can actually ensure a better fans experience than would be traditionally through analog. Because ultimately, this is what we're here for, is to deliver an experience for the games through the venues and the precincts. And then from a legacy perspective, ensuring that these venues, new and existing and modified, are operated and maintained more effectively through using digital and data really to provide that lasting legacy that we're not taking on a burden of new assets that we're not operating and maintaining more effectively. So I think though, sort of in summary, that procurement, that fans experience and that operational efficiency comes into place. And I think also, Adam, it really focuses on is around if we want this true digital legacy, and this is one question I have back for you, is where does leadership matter most? Um, Technology, governance, culture, all of the above, if we really want to true digital legacy, where does leadership matter most here?
Hmm. Well, I I'm going to jump to governance, and I'll sort of explain why. One reason is technology's never really been the barrier or problem. It's what technology is it that we've specified or procured or mishandled or misused. Um, I think what was the other word? Culture. You mentioned culture. I think culture is
Yeah,
a really,
culture and tech,
yeah.
yeah.
Culture is an important one, but governance does stand out as the key one for me. And there's a bit of a link to your response to my question there, the last one, where you mentioned procurement. And I, I would probably be lying if I've been a little underwhelmed with procurement related documents that I've seen in the marketplace around 2032. I know we're on the clock, if not behind time, and we're trying to accelerate planning and design and delivery of some pretty big chunky assets and infrastructure. However, even just expression of interest documents are a really important platform to send signals and make statements and attract interest and investment. And it takes strong leadership and strong governance to make sure that even the littlest details, like words that are put in or left out in
Yeah,
EOI documents, we can't afford to that happen. I mean, every government, and it's been very clearly signalled by the Queensland State Government that they want private sector investment, right? They want to attract the private sector. Government can't do everything on its own. Um, so those early EOI documents, even though the marketplace only gets to sort of see them for 10 days before they're straight into sort of tender response phase, um, it takes leadership and good governance to get the right narrative and express the right level of commitment and vision, even in those early documents. So I go to governance as I think probably one of, if not the most important ingredient here. But I also say governance um, importantly for South East Queensland because that's one really strong characteristic of this region that I think differs from anywhere else in the country, to be honest. South East Queensland, the Council of Mayors, the city deal that we have, the largest city deal in the country, the SEQ city deal, three tiers of government coming together. So I just feel that SEQ, it's up to SEQ to sort of, lose this opportunity, um, if they want. But good governance, strong governance is going to be the mitigating factor, if they choose to.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's interesting in terms of the level of detail that we're currently seeing within the EOIs that are coming out for the precincts and the games. And hopefully we'll see that in the main RFQs that there's some more concrete detail digital requirements are coming out there. So we remain hopeful there, Adam.
Yeah. In terms of remaining hopeful, here's one for you, Gav. If you had one message, if you were in the lunch line and you had the deputy premier in front of you, and you had a soundbite to share with the minister, what would the one key message be around digital and the games that you would express?
Well, typically major capital delivery projects, Olympic Games have an exponential cost to that. Quite clearly here in Australia, especially in our states, governments, we don't are not flush with cash. So getting the best value for taxpayers' money whilst delivering world-class stadiums will be of paramount. So how can government as a client be an intelligent client with that? And what I mean by intelligent client is intelligent with data and digital. And how can it use digital and data to actually purposefully procure assets, physical assets and digital assets to ensure the costs are kept to a minimum and in terms of we keep the budget and from a time perspective. And I think also for government to act as a leader in that and not leave it up to the supply chain, not leave it to the private sector to work this out, because the private sector will work out things for its own value and benefit, and government as a client has a responsibility to the public and to Queensland in terms of to deliver this the most effectively way it can. So that would be my message. Don't leave it to the supply chain and private sector and to sort of harness that leadership within.
If I can jump on that, and I know it was my question to you, but if I'm to supplement that, I feel like I've been thinking a lot about, um, what's the statement that Brisbane 2032 makes? What's its big leap? What is the benchmark that it sets? And I feel from a vision perspective, making these games the most visible. I'm going to use the word visible for a number of reasons. Build infrastructure, build venues, but build the most visible games. And it's sort of quite ironic, a lot of digital related initiatives and strategies are quite sort of invisible, right? But what I love is that the power of that digital infrastructure that's put in, um, the visibility that it can create. So use connectivity, use transparency, as you say, use data to make things come alive and to make things very visible. And I think that transparency and that visibility, really speaks to the current world that we live in. The challenges that we have, um, the events that we're seeing, I suppose the polarization of certain things. I like this idea of, a physical games, building venues, delivering infrastructure, but making them transparent and really building intelligent, visible games would just be a huge opportunity, I think. So look, that's kind of our rambling for this first episode of the Digital Games Dispatch. We're going to try this on in future episodes with some of our guests in the coming weeks in the lead up to the SEQ 2032 Digital Assembly in Brisbane. Head to our website, digitalbuiltforum.com, to find out more, register for the event, and engage with us at the DBF. But for now, signing off. Gav, thanks so much. Look forward to speaking soon.
Yep. Cheers, Adam.